Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for the Week 14 NFL main slate. Gonna make sure you're ready for all of tomorrow's action. But first off, a look at my top 3 QB stacks, and I'll be building some of my GPP lineups around over there on Draftkings. And then afterwards, a look at the prop side of things and a few props on Underdog and Prize Picks that have already entered myself. You might want to consider adding to a few slips of your own. So by the end, you have all the info you need to go out there and make Sunday a good one. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. First off, a look at this top 3 QB stack. Stack number 1 is a sneaky way to get to a really popular team tomorrow, but not the way that the public is going to get there. So that, of course, would be Jalen Hurts and the Eagles going up against the Carolina Panthers defense, which has been absolutely ran over the entire year. So while a lot of the public is getting to Saquon Barkley, who I have to say makes a lot of sense in terms of what he looks like on paper, but when you take a look at this Carolina defense and where they rank against opposing quarterbacks and running backs, they're bottom 5 in both categories. So while I think it makes sense that the running game would see a benefit with this kind of matchup, the quarterback side in the passing game, whether that's Hurts, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown out there at wide receiver, also gets a pretty big benefit out there for tomorrow. And what you see if you take a look at Saquon Barkley's ownership is that he is one of the most popular players on the slate, whereas Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Grant Calcaterra, who is now the starting tight end with Dallas Goedert rolled out, are all relatively low owned. So it's not like I think this is the best play to go out there and using cash lineups. I do think that Saquon Barkley is likely going to have a monster game. And if you're playing in those large field GPPs, you're trying to get different in a contest with 20 to 50,000 entries. I think Jalen Hurts could be a way to do that in what is seemingly a really good game environment. So you can see over here, I've got him down as a yes in terms of a team stack with at least one pass catcher correlated. So that would be at least one of like an AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, maybe a Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. A few lineups where I'll probably have 2 guys correlated over there, whether it's a wide receiver, tight end. And then in terms of a buyback, it's going to be some of the time going out there and forcing in a Panthers player, whether that would be an Adam Thielen, a Chuba Hubbard over there at the running back position, but it's not going to be every single lineup. So more so the upside, what I'm trying to target out here with this stack is all of those implied points over there on the Philly side. And the quarterback is something that a lot of people aren't thinking about. Maybe it's game script, them playing from super far ahead, assuming that Saquon Barkley is going to get a lot of the extra usage. I think that is certainly possible. But what's also possible is that they're really going out there and playing the run, and then it's a few big plays to Devontae Smith or AJ Brown that is taking the top off of that defense. So this is more of a large field GPP play than anything, but I think that there is some leverage to be had, whether it's at quarterback or with those skill position players, that try and get different in some of those large field contests. Next up, we got Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, who have a solid matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders secondary, who rank bottom 10 in most QB metrics for the season, and on the rushing side of things are an underrated front 7. So you got Rashad White, Bucky Irving, who are maybe going to have some tough sledding out here this weekend, whereas Baker Mayfield has a plus matchup. And what you've seen if you've been paying attention to some of these matchups over the years is that whatever's most productive for these teams is usually what they rely on. So when you face a team that has a really good front 7 and maybe a weaker secondary, you sometimes see them throwing the ball 30, 40 plus times. And Baker Mayfield is one of those kind of quarterbacks who is not shy from throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. We've seen him do that plenty of times here in 2024, go well over 300 passing yards a handful of times as well. So at $6,400, he's maybe a little bit more expensive than what we're accustomed to seeing, but it's a really good matchup in a week where I think he's worth paying that kind of price tag, especially with how concentrated the usage is going to be on offense. So I've got him down as having at least 2 pass catchers out there in my quarterback stacks. So whether that would be a Mike Evans, an on-net tight end, maybe one of those running backs out of the backfield for some correlation, Sterling Shepard, McMillan over there at wide receiver. There are a bunch of different guys that you can throw into these stacks. And because he has infinitely less rushing upside than a Jalen Hurts, that's why I want to correlate with at least 2 pass catchers. So that's why we have that distinction between a Hurts and a Baker Mayfield. For the buybacks, I'm also a little bit more prioritizing the buyback out here with this stack. So you can see I have it down as most times as opposed to sometimes up there at the top. So Jacoby Myers, if he plays, still technically questionable total right now. If he plays, he's going to be one of my top buyback options. A Brock Bowers tight end could be an option out there for that as well. But all the kind of guys that I'd be incorporating into these kind of lineups. He's about 7% owned, so he's got some ownership behind him, but I would be far from calling him chalk at that sort of range. He's a little bit higher owned than some of the other quarterbacks around him, but considering the matchup, the concentrated usage to guys like an Onden and Evans, I think it makes it an obvious spot to go after for some correlation. So hopefully this goes out there and is a little bit of a shootout. If the Raiders are going to be willing dance partners, maybe put up 21 to 28 points themselves, that is how you're going to get Baker Mayfield to get to those 300 plus yards in those 40 to 50 attempts if the game script is pushing them towards those kind of totals. So that's why I have it down as most times if Baker Mayfield is going to go out there and give us a ceiling performance, it's probably because we're getting some sort of production out of the Raiders on the other side. And then for our last stack that we're going to go through here, he is the highest owned out of the bunch here. So of course, guys, you can see all my quarterback projections over here on this tab. I got to keep the rest of the projections for the other positions behind the paywall. But if you want access to all the projected ownership, all the different projections out there for tomorrow, my player pool, my core plays, how I'm stacking with all the different quarterback stacks that I'm using, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of the video to go out there and join over there, and it'll give you access to the spreadsheets that you see throughout these videos. So of course, everything completely uncensored. You can go over here to the other tabs and see all of those other positions. And what you'll see is that these are going to change throughout the week. So obviously, these are my current projections as of a Saturday morning, but by Saturday night, with some injury news that it comes in, maybe it just changes around the industry, people getting steamed up or down as we get closer to clock. These ownership numbers are going to change quite a bit. So what you'll see with that is a change in my strategy in a few cases as well. So for all of that up-to-date information, make sure to check out the Patreon page, which again is down in the link of the description of the video. But for our last quarterback stack, we got the highest owned of the bunch, and I've got him at 13.6% right now. The reason why it was a good segue to talk about the Patreon page is I think the ownership's going to go down as we get closer to lock. 13.6% is certainly a little bit high, but I have a feeling that he's going to be closer to maybe 10% ownership, maybe even down into that single-digit range. So I love the matchup. By the way, the Falcons defense, one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL, but against the pass, they're not terrible by any means, but they're definitely a little bit worse against the pass than what they have there with their rushing defense. So I think that's part of the reason that so many people are getting to Darnold. They're also favorites, relatively high total game between the Vikings and the Falcons. And just like we had there with Baker Mayfield, when you have that kind of defensive matchup situation, it could often lead to a lot of passing. And so just like Baker, with the lack of rushing upside, I want at least 2 pass catchers. But what you get with the Vikings is not just Sam Darnold, who has had a pretty good year over there at quarterback. It is all the skill position guys that you get to play along with Darnold. Whether that's Justin Jefferson, enough said, best wide receiver in the NFL for my money. Jordan Addison, who is becoming one of the best up-and-coming wide receivers in the NFL. For my money, top 25 guy that you have in the entire league. And he's a wide receiver too, over there for the Vikings. You got TJ Hawkinson, you've got Aaron Jones. And by the way, the Addison is a little bit of bias. He went to my alma mater Pitt, so I got to see him play for quite a bit before he went to USC. But with all those guys, Hawkinson coming back, Aaron Jones out of the backfield, who's an absolute stud. There are just so many guys that you can use for that correlation, which is half the reason to want to play a Sam Darnold. And because I'm going with at least 2 players out there for the Vikings in every lineup, I'm going to have spots to get different. For example, an Addison, a little bit lower owned, a Hawkinson and Aaron Jones aren't nearly as chalky as what we have here with Darnold. So sure, the ownership might be high in this spot, but you're going to have spots to get different within these stacks, whether it's with those players that you're correlating with, as we mentioned, or in terms of your buybacks, a Drake London, Bijan Robinson, maybe a Darnell Mooney out there at wide receiver. You got Ray McLeod. There are a bunch of tertiary guys, like maybe even an Algier, that you might throw into some large field GPP lineups that could instantly get you different and offset that 13.6%. So I like the price tag. I think it is more than efficient there at $6,100. You're going to have salary to spend up in a few other spots. If you're going to go with a premier guy like Justin Jefferson, like sure, it's going to cost you a bit to go to this kind of stack. But if you're not taking Justin Jefferson, like maybe maybe it's an Addison as your wide receiver, Hawkinson out there at tight end. It is a cheap stack when you start going in that direction. So I don't think you have to go with the Justin Jefferson over there at wide receiver. If you chose to do so, it might cost you a little bit more, but all those other combinations are going to be substantially cheaper than what you have with these top two quarterbacks. So I like the matchups with all three of these. I think they have upside to go out there and have really big games. And outside of Darnold, they've got, I'd say, average to low ownership out here in these top two. Really easy to get over the field on that kind of exposure. Sam Darnold, hopefully he gets steamed down as we get closer to lock there. But if he's in that 10 to 12.5% range, like I think, you put him in 20% of your laps, maybe 25 if you want to get a little frisky about it. And that's leverage out there in those large field contests. So I like the matchups with all three of these. Definitely quarterback stacks that I'm getting over the field on that can hopefully move us up in those GPPs as well. And now for the prop side of things, where I've got 2 props on Prize Picks, 2 props on Underdog you might want to keep an eye on out there in your exposure yourself. So first off, we're going to start with this Alvin Kamara over on rushing attempts. He's minus 125 for his over on Draftkings, but on a few other books that have rushing attempts posted, he's up at 19.5 in attempts, and on FanDuel is even juiced a little bit over. So with the soft matchup against the Giants, they're going to have Drew Lock at quarterback. Saints, of course, big favorites in this kind of matchup. I would expect the Saints, who are already one of the most rushing heavy teams in the NFL, to continue to rely on that heading forward. And what you've seen out there with Kamara is that he routinely goes over 20 rushing attempts when they're in those positive game script situations. So as favorites with Drew Lock at quarterback, it's not like I think he's terrible, but definitely a step down from what they were working with before. That's why I like this prop so much. So a little bit of line value compared to the books that have him at 19, and a game script, just situation in general, that makes a whole lot of sense for the over. And the other prop I'm taking is this over on Tony Pollard rushing yards, and it's a really solid matchup against the Jaguars. They rank bottom 5 in the league in terms of rushing yards allowed per game to opposing running backs, and at 66.5 yards, he was at 68.5, even 69.5 yards on a few books last night. So there was a little bit of line value compared to this line, but more so the matchup that I'm really leaning into here, which is extremely soft against the Jaguars. Not only are they one of the worst defenses against the run in the NFL, but they also have Mac Jones at the quarterback position. So just like it helped out Kamara when having Drew Lock leading things, Mac Jones, a lot worse than what you have there with Trevor Lawrence, is going to lead to probably a higher time of possession for the Titans. And what you see in that kind of situation is oftentimes more carries for that position. So at 66.5 yards, that's why I'm taking that over, is usually they're letting up 1-2 big runs a game anyways out there on the defensive side, but especially when it's going to be a team like the Titans that run the ball as much as they do. And then over here in Prize Picks, by the way, it pays 3x if you take those two. No multipliers yet on either one of those spots. And then over here on the Prize Picks side, I've also got 2 props I've entered. So first off, we're going to go with this Bijan Robinson under on rushing attempts. And what I like there with Bijan is that it's a very difficult situation, difficult matchup against the Vikings defense. They're number 2 in the NFL when it comes to defending opposing running backs, and they're also 6-point underdogs out there for tomorrow. So game scripts could be working against Bijan Robinson a little bit, and at most books, he's at 15.5 attempts. So there is a 0.5 discrepancy to what we have here. And then on FanDuel is the one book that still has him at 16.5 attempts, and he's juiced heavily towards the under. So I think that with the push equity at 16, I'll be willing to take this under, especially because most of the other books around the industry still have him at 15.5 attempts, and he is even money on most of those books as well. So not even juiced towards the over. Hence why I like the under at 16 attempts. Then the other prop I'm pairing it with over here on the Prize Pick side is this over on Josh Allen passing touchdowns. It is one of the highest total games that we have the entire week between the Bills and the Rams, and he's also juiced near minus 130, minus 135 for the over on books like Pinnacle for this over 1.5 passing touchdowns. So if you like plus EV value, if you like some juice over there towards the over, you're going to get that out there with Josh Allen in what is one of the higher total games, one of the better game scripts. Bills nearly a 30 game point total, team total, I should say, out there for tomorrow, and also a matchup against that Rams secondary that has been plus one of the bottom 10 in the league this year against opposing quarterbacks. So that's why I like that over on Josh Allen, the under over there on Bijan Robinson. Of course, guys, these are far from the only props that I'm taking out there for tomorrow. In fact, I've already got like 8 or 9 other slips entered out there for Sunday. So if you guys want all of those pieces of exposure that I'm getting to, Make sure to check out my Patreon page for that as well. On top of the DFS side, where I have all of this projection sheets posted for the DFS slate, I've also got all my prop stuff on the prop tier. So Underdog Prize Picks, that's how you can get access to that. Link in the description of the video to go out there and check that out. But that's all I've got out there for Sunday. Best of luck with all of your exposure, and let's get it. That is all for the Week 14 main slate. Before you're hopping out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for me. Also, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll, of course, include our Monday Night Football preview for this week. And go ahead and comment down below who you've got as your top scorer out there for tomorrow's main slate for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. To get access to all the projections, all the different prop slips that I'm going with week to week, make sure to enter this giveaway. And all you have to do is give me that top score. No score, anything like that. It'll be first come, first serve. So as soon as a player is taken once, they cannot be taken again. So make sure to go ahead, put your guess down there in the comments. But best of luck, whether it's with the giveaway out there with all of your exposure, your DFS lineups, let's go down, take down a GPP or two. Prop slips, let's hopefully cash out on that side and make Sunday one to remember.